Hey, Astral Fish subscribers. We are here. Let me adjust the camera just a touch more.
Yeah.
So you're...
A little something new with the channel. We just saw a movie, and the movie Mortal Engines, and I guess we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, trying something out.
Yeah. So, Mortal Engines, first heard about it because I saw a trailer, kind of had a bit of a steampunky vibe. Saw Peter Jackson was attached to it. He's the producer, not a director, as I first thought initially.
Scriptwriter as well.
Yeah, he has got scriptwriter credit. Yeah, I think Christian Reeves has got the director credit, but...
Yeah, that sounds
so,
right.
It's kind of takes place in a bit of a dystopian future, sort of steampunk aesthetic, something.
So we chatted about this briefly, and it's not steampunk because there's electricity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not diesel park because it's not World War II. It's not cyberpunk because it's not super high tech. It's like post-cyberpunk or dystopian punk.
Yeah, it's
whatever's after cyberpunk.
The world has ended, and they've remade themselves, but it has a bit of that steampunky aesthetic to it in that type of a post-dystopia setting. But
they're rebuilding and tech and stuff.
Before going into super in depth about it, I think just my general feeling is that if you want a fun action movie with an interesting aesthetic, I think it might be worth watching in that regard. But
yeah,
that's the short version.
I would say it's definitely entertaining. 3/4 of the movie is really, really great. I'm hoping this person doesn't hit my car because they've backed up twice now. 3/4 of the movie is really, really great. There will be spoilers that we talk about in this, just so you know. So we'll remind you again in a moment, but there will be spoilers.
Non-spoiler recommendation is it's entertaining.
Go check it out.
Entertaining, has a really cool aesthetic. If for that alone, go in expecting
the world
that.
is
It'll
fun.
be a fun
The
time.
characters are fun. The cinema, the visuals are great. It's worth checking out simply for that.
Yeah.
As a baseline.
Yeah.
So definitely worth checking out.
So
I think this is the part where if you are concerned about spoilers, then stop watching now.
All right.
Now.
So,
no, stop. Because we're going to talk about the details of the movie where we spoil it. I think I've elongated this long enough.
They've gotten the gist.
They got the point?
They got
All
the
right.
gist.
These people are looking at us like, what are we doing?
Yeah. So
let's talk about what we liked about the movie
yeah,
first.
let's talk about what we like.
Good things and then bad things, and then we'll do a wrap up.
Well, I think maybe the best way I could sum this up, and then we can go into more detail, is that I think the movie... Well, apparently it was based on a novel, which I got from the credits. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Knowing that...
There is a book, apparently.
Knowing that, this makes my perception of it makes a whole lot more sense, because I feel like the movie, the story, we had a really good foundation and had a lot of good elements in the story. I think that the execution wasn't the best in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like I have seen...
Talking about the good things.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, I have
all
seen anime series go into these types of things with this type of aesthetic and do it really well. I think this movie would have been better elongated in like a 10-hour miniseries form rather than the 2-hour movie form. I say that, and it sounds negative, but I mean that in a mostly good thing. But it's like
you're interested in the world. You'd rather see more of it. You want better developed characters. You know, that's what. Yeah. Longer format. Sure.
Right. Yeah. What would you go about that?
Sure. So I think that's an opinion I have about most movies these days that are like, oh hey, this is a really good piece. It's a good story. I like the characters. I like the world they're trying to build, but it's just not long enough. It's just not in depth enough because they only have 2 hours. You know, it's not enough time to really give me a stronger emotional connection.
Yeah.
That I would prefer. That said, do you want me to do my full list of things that I love?
Go ahead.
So I loved this idea of having resurrected beings, which is simply like an android from Terminator.
The character Strike.
Strike. Yeah. His name's Strike, and he's basically a Terminator of sorts. For lack of a phrase, that's what it is.
Okay.
You just run with me, right?
Okay.
He's got one mission, and he can't be killed, basically. Although he is the last of his kind, so he can be killed. Just a little bit. We'll get into that later. But I really liked that addition to this because that was one of the big questions where it's like, okay, it's not steampunk.
Yeah.
It's not diesel punk. And I went through my mind of it's not silk punk, even though it has like a drop of silk punk. Silk punk being just like what we're working on. Do you remember me posting a Wikipedia about Silkpunk where it's basically
No,
like
I don't.
it's like an Asian steampunk basically?
Oh, okay.
So
The idea of the Silk Road then is where that term comes from?
yeah.
Okay.
Because of the east and things. So because they go east, which is just an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it has those elements in
that honestly a lot of ancient literature talks about going east. You said you got something you want to say.
On the topic of ancient literature, though, because like this is one of the things that I think that the fundamental layers of the story, which now it's made me curious about how the book handles these sorts of things, because it had a lot of mythic archetypes infused in it, but I don't think it executed them very well. Because like it had the even actually in a few cases they explicitly stated of like the past, the history. You know, you have the I think he was the mayor is what his actual title was. And then you have Hugo Weaving's character and you have Tom. And so like you have those three male characters as the main characters in the story, which you have the I wasn't seeing the movie to the end. I enjoy it more, but in the time it was playing out, I was a bit unsure of how it was going out. But you have the would you say the wise king who goes blind and his blindness becomes his downfall. You have Mufasa and Scar would be the two, and then Hugo Weaving being Scar in this case, about who's the super intelligent. Like he even said you can't learn anything from the past, which is like, well, you're a moron.
Okay, bud.
So they were really on the nose about it, which maybe it had to. Maybe they could have been more nuanced about it, which I think maybe that's the way I would sum it. I wish it was a bit more nuanced because I think this is because it had to be condensed into a 2-hour film.
They're also making
very
a
just
mainstream piece.
Well, right. It's just like this happens. Okay, it's done. We're moving on, and that's it. Rather than letting it unfold in a more what I would feel natural way. It's just like it has to force the point because it has to keep going. And this, I think, goes in the idea, though, of like, I think maybe films are not the right medium to tell epics in, which is what I think this story rightfully is, maybe, and that this is not a good execution of telling an epic, because movies, I feel, actually really, really shine when they have really straightforward and simple stories.
Yep.
And I think this one might have wanted to do more. That why I say miniseries might have been the better.
It might be part of an epic. Neither of us has looked it up. We literally just were in the movie theater 5 minutes ago, and we walked out and we're recording this.
The 2 hours of this movie is all I know of this particular story. But with what I've seen, it gave the impression that there was more to tell, and that it wanted to be told better. Yeah,
I would agree. Other things that I liked is the use of action was really well. I feel like Peter Jackson has gotten better as a filmmaker.
You and I are going to disagree on the action part, but go ahead.
That's fine. In his use of action, because he also made sure to incorporate moments. Kung Fu films do this really well. Jackie Chan talks about it in some of his just interviews and whatever.
Yeah.
Where he says you actually go back a couple frames to make sure that the mind can comprehend what's going on, and so he slowed moments in action
You're
down.
Talking about the actual editing then of the action.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the storytelling through action, because instead of just D-Day, Saving Private Ryan, shaky camera everywhere, he made sure to give us moments with characters. Now, the space of time that went on, he's asking you to just kind of pause and like forget that time is passing for a moment, and know that they had a moment, these characters, to embrace a look or a pause, because when life is happening, that doesn't take place. But you can have a moment with someone where you across the room and you're like, oh, hey, this is going on.
I felt the movie relied too much on action to push the story forward.
Yeah.
But you mentioned characters having a moment and looking at each other. Esther and Tom, there's so many times in the movie where they look at each other, literally 6 inches from each other. They look in their eyes. You even see Tom's eyes dart to her lips. And they're like, okay, you got to kiss? Oh, no, they didn't kiss. And they do that like 4 or 5 times. And then the movie ends like, oh, they're going to do it. Nope. Oh, they just hug.
It's a kid's movie. Can we pause for a second? Not about Mortal Engines, but the trailers that were shown with the movie.
When we walked in and sat down and had all the previews played, it was the most weird collection of assorted previews. You had your drama piece, you had your female empowerment story of where she comes from this low low area, and then she tries to make it in a big corporate setting. And you had
A woman over her 40s, mind you, not like
Yeah.
a young woman.
you had
Jennifer Lopez.
You had a kid adventure movie where turns out there's this big secret magic thing going on, and he's gonna go and vanquish this evil something rather.
And then you have a few like Stephen King horror movies
Yeah.
and M. Night Shyamalan. What is it, a thriller maybe, I guess?
Yeah.
Suspense thriller?
Yeah, so there's a horror, there's a Stephen King thriller, and then there was also the How to Train Your Dragon, and it's just like
Who do you think is watching this movie? Clearly women, like that's a baseline because they show a J-Lo trailer for
yeah.
So that's and children, they got How to Train Your Dragon. And then like thrillers and horror movie. It's just
That was the
only
most-
thing we didn't have was a romantic comedy in there, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was
just
really
interesting.
It was really,
Anyway,
really interesting.
I wanted to talk about that for a second because it was like, okay, who do you think is watching this movie? I don't know. So things that you didn't like. Let's move on. I know there's a lot more good things that we had. The architecture was great. The moving cities was cool.
Yeah, the idea of the moving cities was really interesting, and whatever the heck that was, I don't think they ever described it. It's just this big floating thing in the sky with that all these things were coming and docking onto. That was kind of cool.
Final Fantasy VIII did this first time that I remember seeing it as a kid, where you have these cities. It was a school, and it gets up and it flies, and it's similar, except that these were land grounded.
I actually several times was thinking of Final Fantasy and thinking that it was like a miniseries, a video game in the traditional Final Fantasy style. I think would have been a great format to tell this story in, just because of the wide breadth of characters that we see.
Yeah.
That just kind of come out of nowhere, get no introduction. They show up, they're immediately in there. Obviously, these people have a history with each other, but they don't explore it at all. And it's just like, hey.
Also, slices of the world that were like, oh hey, there's this wall.
They threw out.
Tell me about the wall. Tell me about the people beyond the wall.
They threw out a lot of, I guess, in-world references to in their universe, but they didn't frame it with any context. And it's like, hey, do you know this? Oh, yeah, I know that. And then they just tell us about it because I don't know about it.
Right.
So there were several instances of that.
Which is, I mean, that's a hard balance because it's like, oh, okay, well, how much am I going to tell you? I don't want to tell you everything.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to, I don't want to go Dune on you like, oh, hey, here's a reference. Here are my footnotes about the entire world.
And while it's easy to go and point to, say, the Lord of the Rings films for an example, they were a trilogy of. You could say 6, you could say 9, you could say 12 hours. It could be, so it's like obviously that's more time than 2. So I don't know if that's necessarily a fair comparison, given that it is technically a different medium when you have such a long time frame.
It is, but even for 3-hour movies for 2 books, because there were 6 books in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because the publisher chopped it into 3 instead of the original 6 that Tolkien had published, or had wanted to do it in, where there's like these clear, distinct books, 6 books. The idea that you said earlier about epics not being great for the film medium, I think is a really interesting concept where my thought is it could be good for the film medium if you just take like one slice of the movie.
Right.
Maybe it's the last section leading up to the climax, but before that you have a 10-hour miniseries and like a short film with your marketing, like putting money into marketing where you disseminate the information of the world. The movie has to stand alone still, but sending people back to other mediums to purchase or watch or view or participate in and engage in some way would make it more well-rounded as a world, I think.
So I think this is an unfair question for me to answer, or maybe me to ask, because I'm not a person who spends a lot of time reading books. You do spend a lot more time with audiobooks and stuff, so maybe this is a fair question to ask you. Does this movie make you want to buy the book?
So
does that it's like,
I understand,
is this a successful ad for the book?
I understand your exact question, and I want to preface it with I at the beginning said that 3/4 of the movie was really good.
Yeah.
Because again, spoil if you listen to this point and you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil the movie. I'm going to tell you how it ends right now.
I'll jump off it because I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
So the movie ends with a USB stick being plugged into the massive weapon that's created and then powering it down because it's an override code. Which is like, okay. the movie was really great until that's the solution to the problem.
So
because it's just there's.
I would have been
It's dumb.
So
It's dumb. Like,
I
can
would have
can
been.
I code Geass a
well,
second?
Hold on.
Code
I would have
Geass
been.
with these mechs, and you're just like, here's my little USB drive. I hope it doesn't break
Bro.
or get corrupted.
I
Anyway.
would have been. I actually was fairly okay with that and what that symbolized in the narrative, in a mythical kind of context, in like ancient story type of context of what that symbolized. I was fine with that.
Well,
I feel
tell
like what
us what it symbolized.
Okay, well, I think it would have been better though. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's go that way first. So
Give us some-
what we
give us
have
some
in the
context.
story is like. Really, the character who's our main character is Esther, though we were introduced to the story through her first, but then we kind of jumped to Tom because Esther's a really closed-off person. And so Tom is our audience throughput into the world.
Yep, he's our
And so,
perspective
yeah.
shift.
A little annoyed that he was kind of a useless character and he didn't, you know? So it's like you mentioned, the three main characters is you have the mayor, Hugo Weaving, who I don't know what his character's name was, and then Tom. And
Just call
so
him
you
Dad.
have the old guy who gets overthrown, who's a bit a little tyrannical, but he's has some wisdom, but he gets blind and overthrown. Hugo Weaving, who's just power hungry and evil, and then Tom, who's kind of useless as a character. He goes into at the end of the movie of what he wants to do. He's kind of put into the pilot situation in which he's wanted to do. So he grows and he fills into that. So that's great. So Esther's basically our main character in that sense. She had her past taken from her, and turns out, spoiler, Hugo Weaving's character's probably her dad, which that introduces.
Literally saw that at the beginning.
Which several stories have done this sort of thing about the father becoming jealous of their child, and I know. So apparently, it's something that happens. Because it's a common trope in stories, but it is a mentality that I struggle to understand, and I feel like there's a moment where I sort of got it, but I don't. I don't really understand that mentality, but people seem to have it, so it's common enough. But in any case, so her mother gets killed by her father, who takes the super weapon controls away when she's a young kid. She gets taken in by the reborn cyborg Strike, who's kind of soulless and all of that, and he raises her. So she is raised
Kind of
by
soulless.
she's raised by a semi-soulless person, and when she's taken in by him, the one thing her mother gave her was the Eye of Medusa pendant. With inside of that pendant was the USB key to shut down the Medusa super weapon, and Stryker takes it from her. Because he finds her unconscious, so he picks her up and he holds on to it.
Yeah.
And so they make a promise about like, you're soulless and sad, so you know what? I'm gonna kill you and have you be reborn as a soulless thing, basically. And then she, through revenge of wanting to avenge her mother's death, she decides to no, we're not gonna do that. I'm gonna avenge my mother's death. So rage and vengeance drives her to not give up her soul. Which is an interesting thought to explore, I think, maybe. But she made a promise to give up her soul, basically. And so Stryker pursues her and is like, no, you made a promise. I'm going to kill you. You said I could kill you. Which I wonder if that ties into that Bacano thing yeah. Anyway, so he says he's going to kill her. And then after all of this chasing, he's one of the main antagonistic forces of just destruction, which it made me first think of No Country for Old Men. Only No Country for Old Men with Anton, he was imposing and dreadful, and he was showing up and you just like, it's bad. Stryker was more of just like a wrecking ball with explosives on it. Very unnuanced and just like about it. But they meet, and they eventually get into a spot, they break down, and they make amends, so to speak. She confronts, I don't think it was executed that well. But after that, he then gives her the pendant. And so there's that, like, choosing to live, choosing to not throw away everything and to descend into darkness, sort of, is what that kind of symbolizes. And through confronting that, facing it, and rejecting it, gains a piece of her past back. Mm-hmm. And then she takes the past her father, Hugo Weaving's character, said you can learn nothing from. Mm-hmm. That past is then used to stop the path of destruction he was setting forth. So in that kind of sense, it works. Maybe not executed the best, though.
Yeah, this is why he said the character Strike, this Terminator-type, android-type character, is semi-soulless because he dies when he gives her the pendant from love.
Her
love for Tom, Esther's love for Tom, kills this unkillable resurrected android character
and
because he's semi-soulless.
Well, yeah,
but this is the execution error that he's talking
the thing
about.
is that, well, not necessarily, because that still fits in with that idea of her her using love and rejection, or her love and willingness to live kills the thing that was going to kill her. You know, it destroys that force. So that still all works together there. The execution was more, I think, just in this thing of what we talked about earlier about how the movie is just kind of like, and now this happens, and now this happens, and now this happens. It doesn't necessarily feel like they're unfolding in a natural way. It's just like, thing happens, thing happens, thing happens.
Yeah, we don't dive into character development as much as you or I probably would have liked.
Yeah.
It's mostly a plot-based piece, which is why there's a feeling of the action pushes it forward quickly.
I'm gonna have to blur out that logo.
Turns out, pushes it forward time and time again. So it's a good movie, though. I don't know. Did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that kind of hits a lot of the different points. Was that it was an interesting look into a world with an interesting aesthetic. Could have been nicer if it was expanded a bit more, though. But I think it could be. I think if you go in looking for a little bit of a good time and not looking in for something deep, I think you could enjoy it a lot, though.
Yeah, it's just an entertaining flick for the holidays.
Yeah.
That's all it is. You're not gonna... We can have a more philosophical discussion about it regarding like the history being worth people's time, whatever. But for what it is and like this quick review, it's simply like, go check it out.
Yeah.
It's worth checking out. We both enjoyed it still, even though they were like, oh, well, this.
Yeah.
Because we both have a background in filmmaking.
Yeah.
We've made a number of movies together and separately, and it's just the way it is. So, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought below. If you've read the book, curious, is the book better? I'm probably not going to buy it. So feel free to ruin the book for us, and maybe write spoilers at the top.
Yeah.
If you
be kind to the other people in the comment section.
Yeah. We will be releasing this, and hopefully you will go see it before you watch it through. Or if you don't plan to see it, then just, feel free to comment below anyway. But we did try to warn you that there are spoilers. And
well, at this point, they've made it through all the way to the end.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
Anyway, thanks for watching. We also have a Patreon. Buy us a coffee.
Yeah.
And other things. So
stay tuned for more
whatever
reactions. Later.
Bye.